Hey guys, Corey had a free play here, hard at work. Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We've got a ton of action here at the lab, but last Friday, or the Friday before, we released a video that showed our kind of test bed JAMA super gun setup here at the lab, and we had a lot of questions like what we were doing, how it works, and everything. So we're just gonna show you. We're gonna show you all the components inside of it, and so follow me back, we'll check it out. And as you can imagine, actually, let's take 2 steps back really quick and peek in this room right up there. See, those are all just raw spare boards. They don't have any cabinets right now. And so it's a substantial collection of stuff. And the nice thing about the Super Gun is not only do we get to play them sometimes, we can test them, work on them without having to put them in the full cabinet, which saves a ton of time having to move stuff around. All right, guys, so this is the famous tackle box Super Gun, as you call it, which kind of offended Josh. This is actually a high box electronic box. You normally see one of these mounted up on a wall, maybe holding telephone equipment or something like that, but it is a box that's designed to prevent static electric buildup. And so here, these are the guts. Up here on the top panel are all the controls, the speakers and everything. And then down here, this is kind of your, what makes it all work. You've got a power supply right here, switching power supply with a 5 volt, -5, 12 volt, and then just your AC ins, which all end up going right here to power the Super Gun Pro Gamer, I think they call it. It's about, I don't know, 60 to 80, maybe even $100 board, depending on the time. That is kind of like, it handles all of the AV processing. It has a lot of really cool features, like a little voltage meter and everything that we'll get into in a few. But this power supply sends power right here into this Super Gun Pro Gamer, which lets it work. And we've also got some other really, really cool stuff in here. Really quick, a lot of y'all noticed this Sega Genesis controller, a 6-button Sega Genesis controller. It's actually really useful for arcade game testing, since most arcade fighting games have up to 6 buttons, so that'll generally cover it for testing purposes. It uses just a little Genesis Mega Drive to DB15 converter. Really standard, really useful, and only possible thanks to this really, really cool Super Gun Pro Gamer, because it's got these very, very useful input ports, output ports, serial communicators, audio outputs, all sorts of stuff that, we're not necessarily using it all, but it's very, very good. And of course, it inputs all of the controls, converts them back so that it can be fed out to the game board, which is really useful. And then for sound, we went a little overkill here. We've got a an ISO converter that converts it to AC to 12 volt, just to make it extra pure. Then it sends it over to this audio amp, which receives the signal from the Pro Gamer Super Gun, and then it outputs it to 2 different speakers. And we just went with 2 little 4-ohm speakers, but I mean, truly, truly overkill for the setup, but really, really nice. And those are the guts. For the buttons, we went with just your American style, but they are the convex buttons, just a little easier to use, with just an IL Eurostick purple just for fun, kind of match the buttons. Really, really good for testing, since it's, it's an 8-way joystick, which most of the stuff, once it got to DMO, was using 8-way. We've got 6 buttons, which will cover most games. And obviously, there's special control schemes and everything that it might not work for, but if it's like a game like Tron, you're not really using this to play, you're just plugging it in to see if it works. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not a hard build. I mean, I know this looks kind of like there's a lot of wires and everything, but it is like building a small computer or a small arcade, just for household use. And they do sell pre-packaged Super Guns for hundreds of dollars, but if we went through really quick, we could do like a quick component cost here. So you've got a switching power supply, 25 maybe. We'll go ahead and say 75 just for easy math on the Pro Gamer Super Gun. So $100. We've got maybe $10 or $15 for the Mega Drive converter, which really isn't necessary. It's just an easy way to add a second controller. So if you wanted to play 2 players on this. And then we've probably got another $30 or so on the speaker setup. And then we have a couple bonus things that you wouldn't necessarily need. So this is just a little JAMA extension harness so that we can plug it outside of this box. Very, very simple, very cheap. You can find them on eBay. But all in, including the buttons, including the sticks, we're definitely under $200 here for a nice, super quality Super Gun. Things get a little bit more complicated and expensive when we start talking about the monitor. This monitor we actually happened to find in our travels as arcade people, because this is an actual Wells Gardner arcade LCD monitor. in a 4x3 format, which makes things a lot easier because it's instead of taking like a VGA signal, which it can take VGA signals, which this Pandora's box is currently hooked up to send a VGA up here. It can also natively take the 15 hertz signals from these games output normally, at least most of the games that we use. But it can also take, it's a tri-sync, so it can take all of the signals. It can take the standard, the medium, and the high resolution signals. So it's a super, super useful, especially for these purposes where we're trying to test all sorts of different boards on this system. So it's really cool. Some other stuff that we have that is useful on this that I'll show how they work in a little bit. We have a bunch of little JAMA fingerboard converters. So since this is a JAMA standard, it's not really useful for testing those games that came out in the early 80s, like your Miss Packs, your Asteroids, anything like that, because they use a totally different pinouts. Each one used like a different pinout until this nice JAMA standard game. So like, for example, this would convert a pack to JAMA so that this could be used for a Pac-Man board, which this is actually is, and we'll plug that in a little bit. It's not working, but you can kind of see the theory behind it. And we've got boards in here for all sorts of really cool stuff. This is for your Rockola games like Nibbler. You've got a System 16 adapter. We've got some Galaga adapters, some specialty Galaga adapters. This would handle Mappy and Pac-Land, those later kind of Namco Midway releases. So really, really cool, really, really useful. Not necessary, and I think these each cost $15 to $20. So we've got a decent amount of investment in that, but obviously our use, again, of this is probably different than what you're using it for at home. What you're using it at home probably is you're probably going to make use of that VGA out, and you're probably going to make use of the RCA cables out for sound and plug it directly into a compatible TV or monitor that still uses that kind of equipment, which would be perfectly good for home and would give you the option to play some games. So really quick, I'm going to hook up, I guess we'll start with this Pandora's box just so that you can see kind of what a generic emulator setup. Now, this Pandora's box is a Pandora's Box 5. We found it in a game and just have never thrown it away. And it has a lot of games on it. So if you were looking for like a inexpensive emulation station, this would be a pretty good example of one. Not that I endorse it, which I wholeheartedly do not. This would be a very, very easy way. So you've got maybe $200 in that. I don't know how much these cost, maybe $100 in a Pandora's box. And then it just depends on your monitor. And obviously this is a high quality, super great monitor. But just like that, we've got, I don't even know, it says 950 games. And we've got really cool things that we can look at in here. So you can look in here and see voltage, which is actually a little high. It's a 5.14. So if I adjust it on the switching power supply, I can drop it down back into a better range. And fortunately, with these Pandora's boxes, they'll tolerate a much larger range than some of your retro arcade games. But 5.05, pretty good test range for a 5-volt line. Gives you a little bit extra so that you get a little bit of loss as it goes into the board, just some natural resistance. So that's a pretty good setting right there. You can see our Genesis controller adapter powered up pretty well. I'm not hearing any sound, so let's see if it is turned down. And the other nice thing really quick about these little super gun systems is they include some buttons for test and for credit or select that just come built onto the board, which is very, very useful. And it even has some smaller buttons there. Looks like we have, a different test and service switch. And I think this is actually a coin switch. So really, really useful. You don't have to wire them up. So it saves probably 4 or 5 buttons that would normally be up here that you don't really need to use that often or see. So really, really cool. Let me see if I can turn up the sound. Oh, right. So Josh used this audio amp and actually installed a nice little potentiometer right there to adjust the sound. So let's see if it's just, whoa, that's too loud. So it just wasn't making any sound, and I turned it way up. All right, so here's the Pandora's Box 5 that has, oh my gosh, 960 games on it. And look, there's Marshall Masters even. Now, I did not program that sound. It's what Pandora's Box 5 comes with.
Ready.
And this is a game that we have, a game that we love. And you can see, though, the kind of appeal of this type of setup. Because just like that, we're in a pretty decently emulated low latency setup. And let me see, and look, I can even come in here with the Genesis controller now. and move around and pick my character. So with this setup, conceivably, I forgot Martial Masters is a 3. Is it only 3 if you're on multiplayer? I guess so. So just like that, I'm playing, it's emulation, but I'm playing a Genesis controller plus first player on the Super Gun built-in buttons. So really, really useful for test purposes. Again, though, not really a cool board. So we'll hop off that, turn it off, unplug it, and we'll go grab something that is a little more real really quick. Let me move this Pac-Man board out of the way. I'll show you how to use this in a bit. But I kind of queued up some JAMA games. We've got a Splatterhouse right here that hopefully turns on and everything. I haven't tested this before the shoot because I'm not as professional as we should be. But let's check it out. So we've got it plugged in. Let's hope it works. Ooh, so you see, this is the kind of interesting thing about using some of the older games. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time fixing it. It's just a little sync problem. But remember, this is not emulation. This is a real board that I can credit. And if I had a little bit of extra time, I could. Oh, and I see that this one, we've got a little more voltage drop. So I'm going to up our voltage just for stability. And that's how useful that little voltage meter is. So 5.03, that should be good. And the nice thing is, though, we know, look, the board's working. I could spend a lot of time getting this monitor adjusted perfectly. But look, we've got sound, so we know sound works. We've got an image on the screen, and we've got our buttons working. So this is a working board set. And just like that, we were able to test it. Splatterhouse is a just great game. So here, we'll try another one, and we can see kind of how fast and useful we can test things, assuming this next board works. And if you're wondering if you're at home, these are just pizza boxes. We found are really useful for PCB storage. They're normally large enough to store just about all of the games. All right, so this, I hope, works. This we actually found in an old candy cab, and I had never heard about it before. So you can see it was coming up. There it is. So Super, I assume Baseball 99, and you can see the monitor trying to hold it. And every time it changes the scene, the monitor has an issue. And all of that could be worked out. But that does show you kind of the complications. Even like an arcade monitor, trying to get sync on this is kind of tough. So you could use instead like a Gondes type setup so that it would be a little bit more reliable. I mean, that might be overstating what a Gondes is good for, but that might make it a little bit better. But this is definitely not a game problem. This is just the arcade monitor, this one right here, having issues switching and finding the exact signal for the game. Which, again, I could spend a lot of time adjusting it, but I already know it's a working game. So that's kind of the benefit of the test bed style Super Gun versus maybe the Super Gun you'd be using at home, which most Super Guns are used for kind of, rarely for test purposes, but instead for like setting up your own Super Turbo setup or something like that. And you saw how strong that VGA was. I don't really remember. This is from that last Robby Roto not game of the week. I just can't remember if this one synced up well or not. Let's see if it comes up. There it is. So you can see the Game Elf outputting at whatever it's outputting was a little bit easier for this monitor to track. So that does show kind of the benefit of using a modern game with a modern monitor. If we had, say, a standard res native VG or CRT monitor with those others, I think it would have synced a little bit easier. But yeah, here it is. Here's the test bed. Here's the really, really awful Game Elf setup. We'll see if Robotron loads. But yeah, guys, this... Wow, that kind of hurts. Oh, and I exited the game. But you can see, and with these modern games, it's really funny. You can see how the power, they're resisting so much less just natively across the board. So it jumps every time we plug one of these kind of lower power usage, newer, more modern PCBs. Again, which is why that 5-volt adjust is so useful. So we'll see how bad. Ooh, that sound was bad. Ah! It's not really recognizing. Oh, there goes. Kind of. How did that work? It's kind of recognizing some of the controls. Like, not perfect, and you'd want a dual stick here anyways, but it does not appear to like this, the way this joystick is hooked up. Oh, I was going to see if I could use it on the Genesis pad. But yeah, so let's, just a quick review. Super, super simple. Little speaker and built-in button and stick setup, which, if you're doing a test bed, I definitely recommend. Obviously, if you're building a super gun at home, you're probably going to be using a fight stick or something like that you'd want to do a port into like your DB15s there, which most fight sticks can be ordered or at least converted to use DB15. So you just plug your fight stick in here, do a little drill hole like that, have it sitting out, and you could even go with a shorter container. But with you're trying to just test boards, this thing, this is about as good as it gets. Really quick, I'm going to show you a non-working Pac-Man, so you can see kind of how the adapters work. This one I have been testing because we've been working on getting it back out to the floor. It's got some edge damage and everything, so there's a lot of work we can do. But you take one of these cool converters, so this is just Mike's Arcade Pac-Man Mispac Galaxian to JAMA converter. It's got just a couple options right here. Cabinet set to upright or cocktail. We've got it set to upright. And then Galaxian or a pack. This is a pack. Again, this game doesn't work, so it's not the most useful, but I just wanted to show you kind of these converters can now plug it in. And these converters are kind of interesting because these boards have their own little built-in power supply that normally does the conversion. So you'll see it, it'll come up crashed, but you'll see why, again, it's useful. So just garbled everything. We can mess with it. We can see what the power is coming out. See, and it's an older, so it's at like 4.9, so we increase the voltage a little bit. And we can reset it once we get it dialed in, though I don't expect any major change. It'd be cool if it worked. And of course, this is a decased power supply. So if you start working on this stuff, be careful. You could get shocked if you weren't paying attention. And there would be no problem in this exact build using a encased power supply. We just thought it was unnecessary given that this is the actual case for it. So everything in here is mostly decased, just using little PCB feet and everything, and I guess a silly band to work. But really, really cool. And for the money shot, I'll go ahead and switch back to that beautiful Pandora's box, though I'm not happy about it. The monitor taking that direct VGA from the Pandora's box looks just beautiful. So we'll exit with that shot while I do a little bit more discussing on your control options on these builds. And again, even though this says that it's a commercial Pandora's box, these games are not licensed for commercial use. And honestly, I hate having them even here. So I don't really recommend going and buying it. I much recommend the hard work. But as you can see, with this monitor, a direct VGA connection, really, really meant every time. And if you were using a super gun for a classic like Super Turbo, for example, you would want to only use it on a CRT. You'd want to get your RGB adapters and everything on a good CRT. And that would actually sync pretty easily and be much more easier to use than trying to convert it to an LCD monitor, because all of these games aren't perfect for an LCD monitor. So not the best for playing, definitely the best for testing, giving its versatility. So yeah, so on your control choices, when you're thinking about building this, I definitely generally recommend going with something that gives you an easy, inexpensive to replace 8-way joystick. and buttons. But obviously, if you're building a fight stick, you're going to want to go with all your Sanwa components or whatever your preference is, because you're building it for performance instead of testing. But yeah, so Pandora's Box VGA looking beautiful on this monitor. This is Josh's JAMA test bed. A lot of work went into making it pretty, and it works great for our purposes, and we're really lucky to have it. Not the best for playing games, but definitely the best for testing. And if y'all have any questions, guys, make sure y'all ask in the comments. If you like this video, make sure you click subscribe. We are making content like this all the time, and anytime we see something cool like this that we can potentially help y'all out on, let us know, because yeah, this is a fully functional arcade test system that can be built for a couple $100, and that's really neat. So let us know if you build one like this too and you're inspired, so that we can talk to you, take some pictures, make a post about it. But otherwise, guys, that is just a quick little look at Josh's test bed. We'll be back with more content. We're about to go record some, so it's always coming Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Thanks, guys.